Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 8 News Channel. I'm Daggy Nabakwe. Now today, we tackle one of the most important political questions emerging in Kenya's opposition politics. Can Linda Mwananchi movement survive its growing influence without tearing apart the very opposition it seeks to strengthen? Over the last few weeks, a seemingly ordinary political meeting has sparked extraordinary debate across the country. The meeting involved James Orengo, Babu Owino, and former Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i. To observers, it was simply a strategic consultation among opposition leaders. But to others, it was the first public signal that a new political coalition is quietly taking shape ahead of the 2027 general elections. But perhaps the bigger story lies elsewhere. Why did Edwin Sifuna not participate? Why were key opposition figures associated with him and the broader Linda Mwananchi movement missing from the discussion? And what does all this mean for Kalonzo Musyoka, Rigathi Gachagua, Martha Karua, Eugene Wamalwa, and the wider opposition ecosystem? Most importantly, are we witnessing the birth of a stronger opposition alliance, or the beginning of a destructive succession battle that could hand President William Ruto a second term? Stay with us as we unpack the politics, the psychology, and the strategy behind this development. Now, to understand what is happening today, we must first understand why Linda Mwananchi became politically significant. The movement emerged during a period of growing public frustration over the cost of living, high taxation, governance concern, and perceptions of political exclusion. Unlike traditional political parties, Linda Mwananchi positioned itself as a citizen-centered platform. Its appeal was simple. It was not originally about who becomes president. It was about defending the honorary Mwananchi. That distinction made it attractive to a broad coalition of supporters. Young people joined, the civil society activists joined, the opposition supporters joined, even some politically unaffiliated citizens found themselves sympathizing with its messaging. The movement became powerful because it was larger than any single politician. And that is exactly why today's developments matter. History has a way of teaching us that movements often begin united around principles that become divided when leadership ambitions emerge. The challenge is always the same. Can a movement remain focused on the people once presidential politics enter into the question? That is the question facing the Linda Mwananchi today. Let us now examine the meeting itself. At first glance, it looked like a routine consultation among opposition leaders. But politics is never just about what is said. Politics is about symbols. Politics is about perceptions. And also politics is about the messages that people send without speaking. When James Orengo sits down with Fred Matiang'i, people notice. When Babu Owino joins the conversation, people even pay more attention. These are not ordinary politicians. Each represents a different constituency or demography within the Kenyan opposition landscape. Orengo symbolizes ideological or what you can call ideological opposition and institutional experience. Babu Owino represents the youthful activism and urban political energy. Matiang'i represents the technocratic leadership and administrative competence. When these figures appear together, political observers naturally begin asking questions. Are they building a coalition? Are they discussing the strategy for 2027? Are they testing the public reaction to a possible political alignment? Whether intended or not, the meeting projected the image of leaders exploring common future. And in politics, perception often becomes a reality. One reason why this meeting generated so much discussion is because Fred Matiang'i has increasingly emerged as a potential presidential contender. For years, Matiang'i was known primarily as a government administrator. He built a reputation as a firm and decisive public servant. Supporters view him as a disciplined and result-oriented individual. Critics argue that administrative competence alone does not automatically translate into political success. Yet, one thing is undeniable. His name has entered the national political conversation. The attraction of Mr. Matiang'i for some opposition figures is understandable because, number one, he offers a relatively fresh face compared to long-standing opposition leaders. Second, he carries fewer historical political rivalries. And then last, he may appeal to voters seeking a different style of leadership. But however, the same emergence creates anxiety among established opposition figures who have spent years preparing for their own presidential ambition. This brings us to Edwin Sifuna. Why has his absence attracted so much attention? This is because Sifuna has become one of the most visible and influential voices within the opposition politics. His political messaging has resonated strongly with younger voters. His communication skills have made him a recognizable figure nationally, and his association with citizen-centered politics has strengthened his political profile considerably. When someone of Sifuna's stature is absent from a politically significant gathering, questions naturally arise. Some interpret the absence as strategic neutrality. Others interpret it as a sign of emerging disagreements. Still, others view it as evidence that different political or opposition functions are pursuing different paths. The truth is that only Sifuna himself can fully explain this calculation. But politically speaking, the absence matters because it highlights an important reality. The opposition is not a single organization. It is a coalition of individuals, movements, interests, and ambitions. And those interests do not always align. The opposition's challenge today is not merely defeating President William Ruto. The challenge is deciding who leads that effort. This is where things become complicated. Every major opposition figure believes they can bring unique strengths. Kalonzo believes his decades of experience qualify him. Fred Matiang'i believes his administrative record speaks for itself. Mother Karua believes her consistency and reform credentials matter. Eugene Wamalwa has his own support base. Rigathi Gachagua is rapidly building influence in Mount Kenya. Each leader has supporters who believe their candidate offers the best chance of success. But the problem is obvious. Only one person can eventually become the presidential flag bearer. And that is where alliances become fragile. Perhaps no opposition leader faces more complicated situation than Kalonzo Musyoka. For years, Kalonzo has remained one of the most recognizable opposition figures in Kenya. He has demonstrated patience. He has maintained political relevance. He has built relationships across the country. Many of his supporters argue that his time has finally come. However, politics rarely rewards patience automatically. Few political realities constantly emerge. New personalities enter the arena. New calculations reshape alliances. The emergence of Fred Matiang'i introduces fresh competition. The rise of citizen movements introduces additional uncertainty. And the growing influence of younger political actors creates new dynamics. Kalonzo, therefore, faces a difficult challenge. He must convince both the traditional opposition supporters and the young voters that he remains the strongest candidate to unite the opposition. At the same time, Rigathi Gachagua is carefully positioning himself within Kenya's evolving political landscape. Following the political fallout with President Ruto, Gachagua has increasingly focused on consolidating support within the Mount Kenya region. His strategy appears straightforward: become politically indispensable. If he succeeds in consolidating significant regional influence, every opposition candidate will eventually need to engage with him. And this gives him what you'd call political leverage. And leverage is political power. A divided opposition strengthens Gachagua's bargaining position. If multiple opposition leaders compete for support, he becomes an important kingmaker or the fulcrum of the opposition. This is why developments within Linda Mwananchi and the broader opposition matter far beyond their immediate participation or participants. They influence the calculations of every major political player. There is also a psychological dimension that deserves attention. Opposition politics often creates a unique paradox. Leaders unite because they share a common opponent, but they also compete because they share a common ambition. The same people working together against an incumbent may simultaneously be competing against each other for future leadership, and this creates tension. Every meeting becomes a subject of interpretation. Every alliance generates suspicion. Every absence attracts speculation. Trust becomes a difficult component within the cog. So political calculations become more complicated and unity becomes harder to maintain. The psychological reality may explain why some leaders appear cautious about moving too quickly into formal alliances. This may ultimately be the most important question. Movements often derive their strength from broader participation. People support them because they feel represented. People support them because they believe the movement belongs to everyone. But presidential politics changes everything. The moment a movement appears to favor one candidate, supporters of other candidates begin to question their place within it. Unity becomes elusive, neutrality becomes impossible, internal disagreements become more visible. The movement risks becoming another function within a larger political contest. This does not mean by any means such as a transformation is inevitable, but it means that leaders must make careful choices. They must decide whether Linda Mwananchi remains primarily a citizen movement or evolves into a political vehicle for specific ambitions. There is another dimension that opposition leaders must consider. Every day they spend fighting among themselves is a day not spent challenging the government. Political history repeatedly demonstrates that incumbents often benefit when their opponents remain divided. Fragmentation weakens messaging. Fragmentation confuses supporters, and fragmentation reduces organizational efficiency. A divided opposition can spend so much energy debating leadership that it neglects border or broader national issues. This is why succession battles often become dangerous. They distract attention from the larger objective. Whether President Ruto ultimately wins or loses in 2027 will depend on many factors. But one factor is constant. A fragmented opposition faces a much steeper path to victory than a united one. My final analysis on this are, as we conclude, let us remain to the central question. Will Linda Mwananchi hasten the demise of the opposition? The answer is not yet clear. The movement could become a powerful force for unity. It could help connect established leaders within the younger voters. It could create a platform for broader cooperation or consolidation. But it could also become another battleground for competing ambitions. The meeting involving James Orengo, Babu Owino, and Fred Matiang'i has intensified these questions. The absence of Edwin Sifuna and other key figures has amplified speculation, and the calculations of the leaders such as Kalonzo, Musyoka and Rigathi Gachagua add further to the complexity to an already crowded political landscape. But one thing is certain: the battle for opposition leadership has begun. The conversations are taking place today, and these are the ones that will shape the alliances of tomorrow. And the decisions made over the next several months may determine not only who leads the opposition, but also whether the opposition remains united enough to challenge power in 2027. For now, the story is still unfolding. The alliances are still fluid, the ambitions are still emerging, and Kenya continues to watch. Thank you for watching the Ace News Network. If you enjoyed this analysis, remember to like, subscribe, share, and leave your thoughts in the comment section. Do you believe Linda Mwananchi will strengthen the opposition or divide it? Let us know below. Until next time, I am Daggy Nabakwe. Stay informed, stay engaged, and keep watching the Ace News Network. I'm out.